Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Homeland Security Today's Conversations. This is Kristina Tanasichuk. I am the executive editor of Homeland Security Today, and I'm really excited because today we get to sit down with Dr. Amy Pate, the acting director of the National Consortium for the Study of Terrorism and Responses to Terrorism, or many people know it as START. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're so excited because today, even though I don't have champagne and we should probably be in person celebrating START's 20th anniversary. So it was founded in 2005 and housed at the University of Maryland, a research center that provides data-driven insights into terrorism, targeted violence, and related threats. So certainly right in Homeland Security Today's wheelhouse. We're really excited to be celebrating with you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's interesting to think back that it's been a full 20 years because I still remember that day in 2004 when DHS sent out their site review team, and I was a grad student sitting in the back row, listening to these very established scholars in the study of terrorism, make the pitch to DHS, and blink of an eye, 20 years later, here we are.
That's so incredible. And so, we were talking a little bit before the call about how you were a student and now you're the director. So it's a great place to be. Looking back, what do you think are some of the things that you're most proud of? Because really, you've been in it from the time when you were a wee baby.
Yes, a little baby scholar. There are a few things. First, big data, like the data sets that START has built over the years. When START was set up, there was good research on terrorism. There was even some data, but a lot of it was disconnected. A lot of it was more historical, in-depth, qualitative, which you definitely need, but it's hard to then say, like, what can I learn from this case to apply to another case, right? And so through things like the Global Terrorism Database, which is probably our best known product, but we also funded organizational level data sets. We have stuff on individual perpetrators. That just fuels the ability for so much research. And one of the best things about investing, I think, in high quality data is then when we go out and look at who's been analyzing the data, publishing on the data, most of them are not people who work with START in any capacity, right? So it really serves as a catalyst for the field as a whole. And so that's something that I think is extremely valuable that START has brought to the field of terrorism studies. I think the other thing, so Gary LaFree, our founder, was fond of saying that like research shows that the most successful terrorist organizations are highly networked ones. And so as scholars trying to understand the phenomenon, as people interested in informing policy to counter terrorism, we also need to be highly networked in order to be successful. And that's something that START, I think, from its inception, was really conceptualized as a network. Like, we're not just people working at the University of Maryland. So over the 20 years we've been around, we've worked and funded around 200 principal investigators, so leads of individual projects. And most of those are not at the University of Maryland. We have had funded relationships now with around 100 different entities. That's other universities in the United States, it's universities abroad. We've partnered with small and large businesses, with civil society organizations, really just like the gamut. Because terrorism, targeted violence, these are whole of society problems. And so we were set up to engage whole of society in the research.
That's excellent. Well, and we were also talking about collaboration and how important that is for the Homeland mission. So when you look at all the collaborations you've had, like, how do you feel that you've influenced or impacted national or international conversations around Homeland?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of ways. And Some are, we can't talk about. We do have, we don't do a lot of classified work, but we do stuff that ends up being classified, unclassified but confidential, and FOUO and things like that. But I think one thing is we've just helped dispel some myths. I think in the popular consciousness, because 9/11 was such a big traumatic event, and Al-Qaeda and then ISIS were such large, successful organizations that spawned global networks. Um, people think when people think terrorism now, that's what they think about. But those are not the modal terrorist groups. Those are not the modal terrorist attacks, right? The modal is like the most common type of terrorist organization, lasts less than a year, is like restaurant startups. Most of them fail. And now in the United States, most terrorist attacks are by people who are not formally members or being directed by an organization. They are acting on their own or with a small clique, a small group of friends. And that type of attacker, perpetrator, requires a different intervention strategy or prevention strategy than when you're looking at a large multinational organization, right? Where you can try to target their finances or their leadership and things like that. When you're talking about someone who's going down a conspiracy rabbit hole online, those intervention tactics aren't going to work. So I think sort of like dispelling some of those myths, figuring out like what's actually happening now, is influencing and has influenced the policy discussion.
But that also was a tactical pivot on behalf of those organizations
Yeah.
because they pushed down several years ago, hey, grab a knife, grab a
Yeah.
whatever, and just cause damage. So it's fascinating to see that while they are, whatever the term is today, lone wolf, lone offender, lone whatever, that was encouraged by the larger group because they
Yeah.
realize, oh, if everything depends on us, then we can't cause damage. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because like you see this sort of contagion or diffusion of ideas even radically across ideologies because Louis Beam, who was a KKK leader, is the one who like first advocated what he called leaderless resistance, which is the FBI had infiltrated and dismantled a lot of Klan organizations. And he was like, okay, if we're vulnerable now, so you just need to go out and do things on your own. That was in like the early 1980s. 40 years, 30, 40 years later, you have Islamist groups picking up that strategy from a white supremacist.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, and they learn
Right.
fast and they implement what they learn very quickly. So that's, all the more dangerous for all of us.
Yeah.
So,
And that's why you have to keep collecting the data.
yes,
Collecting the data,
absolutely.
keep analyzing the trends, because if you're only focused on what's happening now, you're going to miss what's emerging.
Absolutely. Well, that's why your work is so critical. So we're so happy to be having this conversation. So as you look to the next 20 years for START, what are you most hopeful about? What are you kind of looking at for new initiatives, partnerships? Tell us about the next chapter.
Yeah. So one thing that we realized it very early. It's that, looking at terrorism in isolation is self-defeating, right? Because it intersects with all these other phenomena. It intersects with insurgency. It intersects with near peer competition when you look about how states may sponsor terrorist organizations in their rivals' territory, for example. It intersects with transnational criminality because the number of terrorist organizations that rely on those criminal operations to fund themselves and the number of criminal organizations that morph and sometimes engage in terrorist activity, there's actually a lot of crossover there. It, you know, when you look at conspiracy theories and how they spread, like, so, we are now like sort of conscientiously expanding and working in those spaces as well, because you can't study terrorism in isolation, right? You can't look at radicalization now if you're not looking at the online spread of mal, and disinformation, and the online spread of conspiracy theories. Some of our work on terrorism and targeted violence, it's like, well, school shootings and mass public violence and workplace violence share characteristics of terrorism. And so, like, we need to look at these things in concert with each other to fully understand the phenomenon. Because when you have an individual who's vulnerable, it may just be sort of happenstance whether they fall into an ideological rabbit hole and, complete a terrorist attack because they're pursuing an ideological grievance, versus some other rabbit hole and they do a workplace shooting that's non-ideologically motivated, right? And so you have to look at these things more holistically, which is, moving forward, what we're conscientiously trying to do.
Well, I bet social media has made your job easier, huh?
And harder.
I was really being sarcastic.
Yeah. And especially with the move to things that, like all of the encrypted app stuff, like the telegrams, the signals, the proliferation of things like Discord servers. It's a whole, like, I started in this field and before Twitter was a thing. Social media was in its infancy when START opened its doors in 2005. So yeah, it's a very different landscape now.
Well, we love the fact that you are leading START and leading us into the future and continuing the mission. Thank you for your work on behalf of America, really. It's been great talking with you. And if you want to learn more about START, we'll post the internet address and everything at the conclusion of this interview. But Dr. Amy Pate, what a pleasure talking with you. And again, your enthusiasm and the work that START is doing is really critical to the counterterrorism community. So thank you for that. And again, congratulations on 20 years.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Excellent. Thank you. And we look forward to hearing from you a lot more at HS Today. Thank you.